Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to see you out there on Facebook and YouTube, on the internet and everything. Um, we have a very special guest as usual today. And thank you for joining us at this holiday weekend. We're going to make sure we let in our live Zoom audience as well. And we'll also try to post there in the chats on the social medias how you can join us on the Zoom if you'd like to. I'll make sure and spotlight myself here, add a spotlight for our guest, Marilyn. And yeah, this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're out there on Facebook and YouTube, we'll try to put a link in there in a bit so that you can join us directly here. That'd be wonderful. Otherwise, you could just continue to check it out there. Um, I'm Ethan Janney. I run the program. The wonderful, at least I'm here in Chicago. It's a wonderful sunny holiday weekend here. So I'm sitting outside. That's a pleasure. And I'll just intro the session here now so that you know where you're at and what we're doing. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world. This could include musicians, manufacturers, rebuilders, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour, just $16 a month, a couple cups of coffee at this point, and get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join using the link bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. You're also going to want to check out our audio only podcasts, pianotechradio.com. Great to listen to while you're working in the workshop, driving around, working out, doing the dishes, however you like to do it with your podcast. We also have a blog where we publish very detailed inside information for piano technicians that you won't find anyplace else. Stuff like the history of the action mechanisms, or how to build or rebuild a piano, or how to design a piano. It's that stuff. If you're the high level technician and you're hungry for the things that keep you at the top of your game, we're basically the only place for it. So you can go to pianotechniciansmasterclass.com, but you can also check out the previews of that in detail at Substack, our blog. Also, check us out on socials: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Make sure to sign up for our email list when you go to that website. Very easy when you get there. Yeah, without further ado, I think it's probably time that we give an intro to our guest today, named Marilyn Nonken, hailed by the New York Times as a determined protector of important music, and by Fanfare for her exquisite voicings and unmatched insight. Marilyn Nonken is recognized internationally as a pioneer interpreter of new music, Steinway Artist and Chair of the Department of Music and Performing Arts Professions at NYU Steinhardt. She has performed on some of the world's most revered stages, from Carnegie Hall and IRCAM to the Rothko Chapel and the Festival d'Automne in Paris. Her research and scholarship are expansive as her discography, with over 30 critically acclaimed recordings and two major books, including the Spectral Piano. Her work continues to define and challenge the edges of contemporary repertoire. Marilyn, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What a wonderful career you've built there, and it's fun to walk through it. And as we were talking before the program, NYU is one of my favorite institutions. The campus, the students, the environment of New York City. What a privilege to be able to be a part of that. I'm jealous.
Yeah,
Washington Square Park.
it's a wonderful place. I have to put in a plug because just in the last few years, we actually have built a brand new performing arts center here, which opened just 2 years ago, the Paulson Center. So it's always been an exciting place. But yeah, in the last year, we purchased like 79 new pianos and have some new performing spaces. So it's actually it's very, very exciting what's going on with performance here and the opportunities for our students.
Wonderful. And actually, and it's so funny, I wasn't even thinking about this at all because I was focused on you and your career and what you're doing, but I have a piano tuning business in New York City called Floating Piano Factory, and one of our technicians is tuning your pianos.
Oh, that does ring a bell. Yeah, we have about I think we have about 4 or 5 technicians right now who take care of our
Uh-huh.
more than
Yes.
200 pianos. So
Yes. If you ever run across Daniel DiMaggio, he's been regularly on duty taking care of the instruments there at NYU. Um, so I'd love to just kind of start at the beginning. That's always an interesting place. The foundations of you and your career, or even pre-career. How did you first get into music, and how did this really develop into something where, it actually became a vocation and a calling?
it's a really complicated story. So, I
Got a
think
little bit of time.
like, well, I would say I do not come from a musical family, and when I was quite small,
Yeah.
there's the idea that which I do believe it's great for kids to learn an instrument. And I think it just started very much like that. My parents thinking it would be great to play something. And we had this very old beat up upright piano with paint spatters all over it. And the whole finish was just a mess. And I just played for fun and I just enjoyed playing. And I wouldn't say I had particularly distinguished, teaching when I was young. So I didn't come from a very disciplined background, but really enjoyed playing and enjoyed practicing, which is a talent in itself. I think actually that's counts for a lot. And I became more serious, but sort of got into master class when I was like 15 with Leon Fleischer, and that was like my first, kind of stumbling into
Wow.
yeah, it's very, I think, looking back, I was probably a talented kid in a very undisciplined environment, and I kept sort of plugging away and practicing and listening. And then when I was about, 15, someone said, wow, why don't you, maybe you should do this for a living, or maybe you want to think about going to conservatory or going to college for music. And so, I became very focused, I guess, quite relatively late. But I ended up going to the Eastman School for my undergraduate. And I think maybe it was that sort of non-traditional, less disciplined background that maybe led me towards being more interested in playing music of living composers or less played repertoire. Because I remember very clearly not really understanding when I was at Eastman, my first 2 years there, like, why is everyone playing the same pieces? Why is my studio? Why are we all playing the same 6 things? Why are we came from very different, all of us students came from very different backgrounds and different cultures and different countries, and why are we all doing the same thing? And I think I was a little bit of a square peg that way, and I found a lot of gratification actually playing the music that my friends were writing, or my colleagues, fellow students. And I found a kind of niche and feeling of value in this environment where it seemed that everyone was playing the same kind of music the same way. And maybe things have changed now at a place like Eastman, but at the time, I felt that I was more valuable to be playing kind of music and types of music that weren't already being heard. And so I think that's sort of maybe how I got very focused on playing more contemporary works. And at that point, halfway through my time, I started working with David Burge, who was he was on the piano faculty, and he's probably most remembered now for being the pianist that George Crumb wrote the Macrocosmos and so many of his big pieces for. And David worked with a lot of composers, Pierre Boulez and Luigi Dalla Piccola and Ernst Krenek, and he'd worked with a lot of these modernist type composers. And so I suppose he sort of became more of my mentor at that point. Um,
Mm. So yeah, there's almost like a bit of um I don't want to say like a hockey stick sort of trajectory, right? But they say that when you have like a graph that kind of goes like this, and then like things start to shoot up. It sounds like, I don't know if it was a specific turning point, but um, there's something that happened in your life where it kind of went from like, okay, this is just a kid taking some lessons who's talented, to okay, there's a lot of interesting and valuable places that this particular kid's gonna go.
Well, I think, I think and for, now of course, I teach a lot of, students. We don't only teach them contemporary music. Of course, I teach traditional repertoire and, I played a fair amount of it for a while, but I do feel that there's something to when you have a student and somebody who loves to play and is interested in what they're doing and feels they're valuable for doing it, that's when people really grow as musicians and artists. People don't my impression or my experience is that that people trying to sound like a record or reproduce others' performances or that always don't see so much growth when people really the students get really fired up about a particular kind of repertoire or a particular performance opportunity and they feel there's value to what they do. I mean, that's really when people, yeah, sort of skyrocket. So
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I love that, and it probably served your career to have, sort of a distinctive approach, right? If you're kind of blending in with what everybody else is doing, it may feel okay in the moment, but it it doesn't necessarily take you anywhere special.
well, it's strange because I always say, they're not, it's not that there's too many musicians, but I do feel that there are too many musicians all kind of playing the same pieces. I mean, and I know this when we
Yeah.
have students, if everyone is playing the same repertoire all the time, there's just not that, in our culture, there's not such a huge demand, for pianists in general, so it's about finding something that you have that's different that you want to share with people that if you're the only person playing this piece or the only representative of a certain kind of style of playing or something, there's more reason for people to want to hear you.
We have some recordings, and we'd like to check out at least one, and this will maybe just like be a foundational to get exposure, to what you do and get some context here. So I'm gonna pull up the morale, and I would love for you to give a little context as we go into checking out a sample of your playing.
Sure. Well, right. This is a piece by a French composer named Tristan Murail. Murail is, I think he's like 78 years old now. But I became aware of his music and the music that we call spectral music around like
Ooh.
2000. So I guess it's kind of been doing this for about almost 25 years, which makes me feel quite old. But the spectralists, it's an attitude towards writing music where the focus really is on color and timbre and harmony and this style of music or this way of writing music in a contemporary sense sort of started in the 1970s, both in America and in France. There was a lot of exchange between composers really wanting to focus on, instrumental sound and sensuality and color. And, so this is what I've written a book about, the spectral piano, because you can really trace this approach about how you conceive the instrument, back to, right, the Romantic era, to Scriabin and Liszt, all these, composers who are really thinking coloristically and really about writing music, which was so specifically for the piano and, not easily transferred to any other kind of instrument. And so this piece by Murail is called Les Travaux et les Jours, and he wrote it for me in, I think, 2002. And it's a big piece, but I think we'll just listen to maybe the first, 5 minutes or so.
Okay. Yeah, let's give it a go. All right, and anybody who's listening or viewing, let me know if you run into any issues with that, because you'll tell more than me whether we need to make any adjustments. But let's dive in. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, but I hear people chatting too.
Yes, I think somebody undid their audio, but it looks like my end dropped. I don't know exactly what happened there. Because I probably just cut out, right?
Yes.
All right, I'm so sorry. Let me see what's going on here. Okay, first of all, okay, no, we don't hear any more background noise, so that's good. Let me just try that share again, and I will try to make sure that, let's see here, we'll start from just a little bit in, and hopefully that'll work again this time. Sorry, bear with me. I'm not sure why the technical difficulties. It might be the sharing of the file, and if so, man, we may have to not have that happen. But here we go. Let's try one more time. And share the sound, share full screen, and go. Okay. Can we hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're just gonna have to leave it at that. We got a taste of the recording. I think it may have something to do with the file size, so we'll just have to leave it at that. But thank you for sharing the recording. Were we able to hear just at least maybe about 30 seconds of it just to get a taste? You hear it on your end or no?
I could hear just a few seconds maybe of that.
Okay. All right. All right. I was just gonna have to roll with it. Um, Let me see here. Let me make sure you're spotlighted as well as me. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Um, and then I'm looking for your, okay. Internet should be, the internet's having an issue as well. I'm so sorry. Okay. Okay, can you see me and hear me?
I don't see you. I can
Okay. Okay. That's fine. Let's just roll with it and we'll do audio only for the moment and see if we can get if the internet will cooperate with us momentarily. Um, so can you just give us a little bit of information? You know, you've written about the spectral piano, and it's actually sounds like quite an intriguing topic from a piano technician's perspective, because that's kind of a lot of our parlance when we're talking about optimizing pianos and how they function is the sort of spectral qualities, the color. And so, um, can you maybe think about how you presented your work on the topic in terms of, you know, subcategories or chapters, and you know, what are sort of the main aspects of importance to this concept of spectral piano?
Well, I guess if you're talking about spectralism, sort of from a compositional, composers and performers standpoint, I think it's, people have always talked about, right, the importance of timbre and color. It's always been important to composers in terms of like orchestration and writing for instruments, and certainly I think from my perspective, when you get to the turn of the century, you get to early modern composers like Debussy and Scriabin, there's this real gravitation towards writing for the piano like in a new way and looking at the use of pedal and looking at the use of register and really expanding um, pieces of music to be so much about the tactile and the sensual and the coloristic aspects of how they sound and how that has such weight and importance to the experience of the listener. And because, we can say that that's always been a part of music, but became more of a focus of composers, some composers at the beginning of the 20th century. And I think you could say that in the middle of the century, what really informed spectralism as a compositional movement was, with digital technology, being able to do spectral analysis of sound, really being able to see these spectrograms and see, like how do the harmonics function, and how is pitch and timbre, connected, and how does sound change over time, and how does this really distinguish, one instrument from another, and how can these characteristics be sort of explored in pieces of music and be the basis for pieces of music. So Les Trois Voyageurs, I know we didn't really get to hear it, but it sort of starts out by almost laying out this beautiful spectrum of sound. And then this piece, which ultimately takes like 35 minutes to play, kind of each movement is exploring different aspects of that sound, that harmony, that resonance, and different ways of getting inside what you might call like, the sort of the fingerprint of the sound, exploring different elements of the yeah, sonic sort of fingerprint of the piece. And so, you have composers realizing a piece can be about modulations from different timbres from one to the next, and transformations of sound and color. And it's like using because they're using sound kind of like a painter might use paint, right? It's like about exploring colors, and maybe so it's not so much about like an earlier piece, not so much about sonata form, or it's not so much about a melody and accompaniment, but it's really about exploring different types of instrumental sound, and that's the basis for what these pieces are about. And so
Mhm.
it's an approach to composition, which is really informed by a really profound, right, instinctive knowledge, musical knowledge, intuitive knowledge about sound and color, but also by the technology, which lets us really see in real time how does timbre work, and how do the harmonics behave, and how does it inspire composers to write for instruments. And often with Murai, with this piece, he wrote this piece in 1977. It's a really big piece for him called Territoire de l'Oubli, Lands of the Unknown for piano. And he wrote this piece is not written for the piano, like it's written about the piano. And I think that's sort of the approach to this music is it's music which is really exploring in a very concrete way the sound itself, that the music is what the sound becomes, and it's not something else. It's not a story, it's not a different kind of form. It's really inspired by the timbre and color.
That's really cool. Yeah, definitely from the perspective of piano technicians. And by the way, do you have my signal okay now? My video, my audio?
Yes, I have it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have plan B to my phone here, so
Oh my
I
goodness.
think that works. Um, so yeah, I mean, I am a little bit curious to just we may shift the topic momentarily, but just to maybe branch off on one thing that you said about the piece of Mirage being about the piano. Um, can you give a little bit more insight? Because that's kind of what we love to talk about here. How it became about the piano, and sort of what aspects shine through when there's pieces that are
Yeah,
focused in that way.
yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic piece in a lot of ways. It does things, it does a lot of really cool acoustic things where he's playing with in this piece, Territoire de l'Oubli. I don't know if I write it in the chat, if the title will come out there. Should I try to do that perhaps? In case people would want to check it out.
Yeah, you can certainly do that for sure.
Yeah, I'll just put the name in the chat here.
Yeah, for those of us that don't speak French, that sounds
Right, right. Um, but what's fascinating is the pedal is down on this piece for like 25 minutes as
Oh,
you're.
wow.
So there's all kinds of cool things that happen with the resonance. You get a lot of sympathetic resonance where you start hearing pitches that haven't actually been played. There are things that come out of the texture it's kind of in some ways it's a microtonal piece because of course the piano is tempered, it's sort of in tune with itself, but the resonances are quite, often they're very microtonal. And certainly as the harmonics decay, you get all kinds of really complex and microtonal sonorities that come out. And he experiments with a lot of different ways of building up resonance and seeing what happens in the decay of the resonance. And I guess to that end too, the score, a lot of it is written sort of not entirely graphically, but sometimes it will say, do this kind of figuration until this acoustic result happens. And so there's this fair amount, or do this until something happens with the sound. There's a lot of very descriptive things happening. So, it's really understanding that there are certain things that happen acoustically with the instrument. They take certain amount of time to happen, and that flexibility is built into the piece. So it's a very different piece, right? Depending on which instrument you play it on, because every instrument, right, you're working with a different kind of palette or different bag of tricks. Any instrument you play on, so you become really aware on a given instrument, given space. The piece comes out. I mean, it's the same piece, but the processes work a little differently on every piano.
Yes. And I love that for the aspect also of sort of listening to a nice, high fidelity recording, with headphones or good speakers, right? Because these are the type of things, I run into recurring themes just in life and the folks that I deal with on this program. And, one of them is that on the higher end of things, it's the little things that you don't think matter, that the average person doesn't think matters, or even you yourself may question whether it matters. Those are the things that matter. So like with piano work, I found the best technicians in the world, where a fine technician might go in there and say, nah, I didn't adjust that. It didn't seem like it made a difference. The finest of the technicians are going, well, I thought it might make a difference, so I did.
Absolutely. I mean, I think playing this music of Murail and some of his, colleagues, Hugues Dufour or Gérard Criset, I mean, they were so attuned to the capacities of the instrument and what might be possible, acoustically. So there is interpretation of this music, but you're really trying for certain, really fabulous kinds of acoustic and coloristic effects. And so it's really, really gratifying to play because you're really exploring, what the instrument can do on so many different subtle levels. And I think that's when I ever first had the opportunity to play Murail's music, and I immediately sensed like there's something going on here that I haven't really been asked to do in playing other kinds of music. You know,
Mm,
it's a very different approach towards exploring what I can do as a pianist, as
mm.
really based, yeah, really based on the nuance, and not separating out, you know, dynamic or articulation or color. I mean, these things are all related, you know, all related.
Yeah. Well, and also what I love about it is it pulls the pianist into my world as a piano technician. You know, understanding the construction of the instrument, the physics of the instrument, you know, the nuances of it. Um, so, you know, a pianist that's in a different genre or not playing these type of pieces could get away their whole life without really understanding how the thing works, you know, from the first principle. So that's also wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, I know that at a certain, you know, I've had a few, well, I've had really one major teacher, it was David Burge, who I only worked with for about 2 years, but somebody once, one of my early technician I got to know when I first became a Steinway artist, and this guy named Ed Court, he was a tuner here in New York, and you know, he was like, your piano is your teacher at a certain point. You know, everything you learn, you're going to learn from the instrument, you know, not from a person. And I
Mm.
thought that was yeah, very, always stuck with me.
Yes. And Yeah, and I think this also speaks to, I'm often thinking about, just because it's, again, this is our domain here. You have electronic instruments, you know, pianos are increasingly these days, at least in the United States, you know, for a certain class of people, you know, not necessarily socioeconomic class, but like just a certain category of person who appreciates the acoustic piano and understands the value of it. And again, I can't see someone really doing an effective job at all playing these type of pieces that you're talking about, even on the finest of digital pianos, because it's just like this, we're talking about acoustics here, and you only get a representation of acoustics with the digital instruments, even the best.
No, it's absolutely. I love gabbing with our technicians here at NYU, and I can, but you know, the piano is like a living thing. And I mean, one thing that I love about this kind of music, I just put the name Les Travaux Légers in the tab. That was a piece we tried to listen to, which I hope people can check it out on YouTube or whatever. But you know, it's about, yeah, it's like the birth and life and the death of the sound. Like that's the way these composers talk about, you know, sound has all these different phases to it, and in time it's not just a note, you know, it's something that, right, that has a lifespan and that changes over time. And you know, so as you're playing this, of course you're aware of the instrument, this kind of like living breathing thing, and it has all kinds of tendencies in the different registers, right? You know, and the notes react differently, and they live differently. And I know, like, listening to, I actually really enjoy sometimes before I play a concert, you know, I sometimes really like listening to the technician like tune the piano. And I know it drives some people crazy, but to me, like getting into that, you know, hearing the note over and over and hearing what it does and hearing the cycles, or getting into listening to the grain, you know, the granularity of the sound. And that's very much what I find this music has you know, awakened me to.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I'd love to talk a little bit more even about your own sort of life with acoustic pianos. We have an acoustic piano behind you. I don't know if it's a personal instrument or one that the university is providing.
It is my own instrument,
It is
actually.
your own instrument. And any interesting story of that? Is that one that you've had for years, or something you've recently acquired, or you know, what are your stories around personal relationships with these instruments?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when I was when I was really small, I had an upright, of course, and at a certain point, I think when I was in high school, my parents were like, "Oh, somebody said you should have a grand piano, so a baby grand piano." And so my parents, who didn't maybe have the most resources, kind of got a grand piano, and I think it was a Lowry piano. That not sure if that's a name of a piano. It's you know, sort of a piano
Um,
that they could afford. I don't know the
right.
story behind it. And then somebody had said to them, you know, no, that she should have a Steinway piano. She have a better piano or something like that. And I didn't really understand at that point, you know, I didn't understand the nuances or the differences. And um, I ended up getting a Steinway piano, but it was a Steinway piano, you know, and I was getting to know it, but I took it with me. Ultimately, it came with me to college, but it had a lot of problems. It was an M, and it was made, I think, in the 1980s when perhaps there were some issues with materials.
Hmm.
And so bad things started happening to this piano. There was, I don't know, I'm sure you know more about this than I do, but, so the A-graphs would start popping off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it was so expensive, and these things would pop off the piano, and you'd have to have the technician come in and fix it. And I remember the same technician I was working with at the time was like, there's something not great with this piano. This piano is not your wonderful instrument. This piano is not going to get better. And I
Hmm.
became really aware at that point, it had been sort of bought at a time maybe by people who didn't really know what they were looking for, and it was also maybe from a time that wasn't the greatest time in Steinway's history or something. So then when I was starting to play more concerts, I really needed a reliable instrument. So I went and I picked my own, which is this piano back here, which I picked, I suppose, when I was still a grad student and starting to perform more, and really selected it because I loved certain things about it. And I remember what it cost me every month, and I was like, I've got to pay X amount every month on this piano. I have to play enough concerts or accompany enough lessons to like keep up with my piano, my payments. And after paying it off for 10 years, was so happy that I made it. So I'm very close to this piano, and I love it a lot. It's not the perfect instrument, but the things I really liked about it have are still there. It's still, I think, like a total pleasure to play. So yeah, so I brought it here to NYU with me. And it's had some, significant work done on it just because it's been played so much for, oh, I suppose, 20 years or something like
Hmm. Sure.
so.
Yeah. It's
But
been,
I think the early experience with the piano that was not so great, made me realize again, these are living instruments. They each one is so different, and you become more aware of how the instruments differ from one to the next. Yeah.
and so do you have a go-to technician nowadays there in New York or?
Well, we have at the university, we have this wonderful team, as you know.
Yes.
And so they've been responsible for taking care of it. But they're great. We have a team of about 4 to 5 technicians who oversee our instruments, and they're fantastic. Maybe this is a little dirty laundry, but when I first came to NYU, it was a different group of technicians, and
Sure.
some of the pianos were in just crazy bad shape.
Okay.
Far enough back, but when I first came to NYU and I was giving a recital, a first faculty recital, and I walked into the hall one day, they said, oh, the technician is working on the pianos. And I walked in and he had 2 pianos open, and he was taking parts out of one and putting them into the other.
Hmm.
And I remember just like sort of gasping, like it was crazy. I don't know. It seemed like some kind of, we used to call them sort of Franken pianos that went on. And I also became aware, that a lot of the pianos just were not in good shape. There were strange things with how they felt and what was going on with them. And so, we brought in, different technicians to really
Sure.
work with them on a close basis. And so these guys are wonderful.
Yes.
They know the life of every piano, and they have always have to justify it to, because of course keeping up all these instruments is so expensive, but justifying it to the administration. These are living instruments, like having a wine collection or a cheese cave, but just so much, it's something which grows and changes and has to be nurtured. And so it's just like a pleasure to work with the technicians that we have here now. And they can yeah, you tell them any instrument, and they'll tell you its history and everything that's been done to it, where it's at, and how
Yeah.
it's, you know.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, is a couple of days ago, I was just looking at the classified ads for the PTG Piano Technicians Guilds, and there was various ads for piano technician positions. If anybody's looking, I saw one for Rutgers University, where actually I went to school. I went to that music school and actually learned some of the basics of the skill from Dave Miller, who was a technician on staff at the time. And then Indiana University Jacobs School also had an ad. But it's kind of like from my experience and seeing it from afar. I worked at Northwestern a little bit, helping out with their pianos. It's almost like an on-off switch at various universities, whether somebody has cracked the code of communicating well enough with the administration that the pianos need to be taken care of, and it's worth the investment. And you can sort of tell the huge disparities even between the investments that various universities will make in their instruments based on kind of, I think, just whether anybody's gotten through, and delivered the message of the value of it.
Yeah, but we have gorgeous some of the gorgeous instruments here now, and so well taken care of, and yeah, it's been it's been very gratifying to sort of build up the this sort of stable of instruments that we have.
So I would like to sort of switch the topic. It feels like it's kind of weird territory we were before, but I don't have the question fully answered for myself, and I'm wanting to ask it. I'm wanting to step back and ask where you're from. Like, so, when you were that young player, where was that? Was not in the New York area. Where was it?
No, I mean, you mean before I went, I grew up in
Just
the
when you grew up. Yeah, where did you grow up?
Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest in
Okay.
a little village outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. And there you go. I heard Wisconsin. I heard the accent come through there when you said Wisconsin. But you also had like your accent does not necessarily scream Wisconsin. I feel like if parents from a different country or something, I don't know. I don't know if that's
I
the
know.
case.
I came, I left when I was about 17 to go to Eastman, and then
Okay. All right. You're just
after
a Midwesterner, Wisconsinite.
definitely it's in there.
Okay. All right, great. Um, in terms of your position there at NYU, and leadership there, and it's such an interesting scenario now. You can look back at the history of music and the evolution. We actually covered several times these interesting touch points with, someone like Nadia Boulanger and these various folks from all sorts of different directions, like kind of going to her and almost getting blessed and finding their sort of direction in the musical career. It's such a totally different landscape, these days than it was back then. We've got social media, we've got different career trajectories. Is there an intentional approach to how the students are worked with in terms of guiding their career, or is it more like, well, let's just teach you the musical tradition and you'll find your path?
Well, I would say that really differs depending on, on who you ask. I mean,
Yeah.
before I was chair, I was a director of piano studies here at NYU, and we always sort of pride ourselves on having many different the different faculty members really come from these different traditions, right? We might have people that come from the Russian tradition who came over and have really specific ideas about technique and repertoire and a whole performance tradition, which is incredibly special. I'm very American in the way I was taught or not taught, and the way I landed on the way I play and how I developed my technique, which I think is, equally representative. We have teachers that come from who are Asian teachers who have had different kinds of training, right? There's these various, sort of nationalist type schools and approaches. And one thing I'm really proud about in our department is that, we hope students can benefit from all of these things, right? And not to be like, this is the one way to do it. And so I think that very much is my approach also with careers. Some students are going to want to go on to play competitions and try to find agents and really concertize for a living. A lot of people sort of have the fantasy of going and teaching at universities or conservatories, which is a possibility, but a lot of other students are going to maybe start festivals, are going to teach privately, or maybe some people are going to go and be involved in the arts and also be fantastic musicians who simply do not concertize for a living, which is, we have some fantastic performers who choose for a million reasons that maybe the life of a performer is not necessarily what they're after. I mean, I think being a performer, and particularly a performer of any form of like concert, classical type music, it's a pretty hard sell. It's a difficult career. And so I think, I spend a lot of time with our pianists trying to learn, not only what kind of music do they really want to play, and what do they want to devote their lives to, but what kind of life do they want to have? Because life of a musician is not easy. And it's not easy in New York, but it's not easy anywhere. And so we sort of try to direct people in the way that's going to make them happiest. I have to say, when I came to New York and was a freelancer, in the 90s, I knew a lot of great musicians who left music because the life was too difficult, and they couldn't have vacations or families or health insurance or whatever. So I think those are real things. In different eras, musicians have been supported differently. And so we do try to think very, professionally, not just about what kind of musician does the person want to be, but what kind of life do they want to have? Because if you don't have the life that you want, you're not going to be happy making music. So, to me, it's very tied together.
Yeah, that's a great sort of broad perspective, broad scope perspective. Um, can you share a little bit more about what your role has tended to entail, both your like official kind of position, and just kind of your position within the university? What niche you fill there?
Right. Well, a fair amount of it doesn't have as much to do with my work as a pianist,
Paperwork,
right? I mean,
politics.
I oversee our Department of Music Performing Arts Professions. It has music, but it also has things like music technology, music business. It also has dance. It also has like education and art, yeah, music therapy and drama therapy and educational theater. So it's quite a large, almost like a school of the arts,
Yeah,
almost. And so I've learned a lot about that, how those different areas work. And one thing I'm really interested in, is how we collaborate with all these different areas and how these areas work together. That's
absolutely.
interesting to me. But I think also, I think being in a position like this and being a performing musician has been really important to be able to give concerts and to speak from the perspective of somebody who is trying to reach new audiences and who is trying to who's concerned with the arts and bringing the arts to a higher profile. I think at the university is really important. I think, so often people think that the arts are something that are kind of negligible or, icing on the cake or whatever, but the arts are, tremendously important to people's
Mm,
well-being, right? And
absolutely.
culture and in today's world to people's sanity. The release and the experience we have through the arts is massively important. And so I think I have the agenda of also just bringing that up to a higher level. That if I have a meeting with the dean or the provost or the president, there is a musician in the room. And I think that's not as common.
Mm. Um, well, at the risk of getting political, which we do not have to get political, but this is totally now at the top of my mind. I have been in academia myself, at universities in New York City, and I have several friends in academia, and so I'm getting like a little bit of a firsthand taste. Somebody saying, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to have my grant next year," and they're sort of changing directions and adapting, or if something hasn't happened yet, they're preparing. You do not have to share about this at all if you want to avoid the topic. But if you would like to share, have you seen direct impact of, some of the talk that comes in around, cutting here and there or changing the focus of this and that in education?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, right. Who wants to become political? But yeah, we've seen, yeah, hundreds of millions of dollars lost from the university this year because of federal policies. And one thing that really brought it home to me was I've worked a lot with the American Musicological Society because I'm a music historian, and they have these fantastic series that I've performed on called Many Musics of the Americas, um, which was looking at different American musical traditions and publishing books on them and giving concerts on this. And that was an government. It was a program that had government funding, which was revoked. And
Mm,
this is for someone like myself, and something which I thought was very much an endeavor that really celebrated American culture, American music, which was in a sense one would want to say not really political, in any way. And so yeah, I think I told my doctoral students about that. Yeah, it's even if you look at things like places like the Kennedy Center, our venues, our academic societies. There's so many things, even a musician's right to travel and to travel freely. A lot of people are feeling these things are threatened right now. So yeah, I think even if you're involved in something like the arts, which you feel should rise above politics or is not political, it has been politicized. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I remember, studying. I had a great class. My first year of school when I was still at Lake Forest College in outside of Chicago, and it was African American music history class, and I remember specifically at certain points in the class learning about these musical ambassadors, which were sort of so important in the like in the early to mid 20th century, like a Dizzy Gillespie or something like that, going on some tour and, playing in all these different countries and sort of sharing the American culture. And, we can all see today the effects of those foundations where, the American cultural tapestry is celebrated worldwide, and sort of held as the, as is in some ways a standard, for the world. Yeah, so that's a good point you make about celebrating American.
Well, and another thing, I'll just put it out there, but the universities, right now a lot of higher education is kind of under attack, but in our country, the universities are where a lot of music and the arts really are supported.
Mhm.
Early in my career, I did a lot of going from campus to campus and doing residencies and working with students and master classes and traveling around a lot and speaking to an agent at the time. I thought, oh, I'm doing so many things at the universities. I should try to, get out more and play at different types of venues. And he was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is where the arts are happening in our culture. This is where the arts are safe. These are places where the arts are being funded, and
Mm.
like, this is a vibrant world. This is, and so, obviously that to see that being threatened is really deeply disturbing.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for sharing about that. Appreciate it. Um, we're about at the end of the hour, and it's been a wonderful conversation. So sorry for some of these technical glitches that occurred. It's not typical, and apologize you had to deal with that. But we're back. We've been stable for a while here, and hopefully people can get a chance to check out the music that we've referred to, and also just kind of check out your music. I'd love for you to have a chance to tell people where to go to find out more, or some words of wisdom or words of advice that you want to share before we walk off the program here.
Well, I guess I would just say, because I was hopeful that people could hear some of this music. I'm just put in the chat, by Tristan Muraille, or I have just now a new CD out by another spectral composer, Hugues Dufour. Those are both CDs that are just out, and they're on YouTube. They're available on Amazon or whatever. And I guess for me, always it's been such a pleasure speaking, but I think the music also is so powerful and speaks for itself. So I'd encourage people to have a listen, and certainly to reach out to me if they have any questions. I always love to speak about this and hear what other people have to say about it as well.
Absolutely. And I'm tempted to try to play that again, but I don't want to risk it from my phone. But we have a lot of incentive then to go. I think especially this audience, especially the spectral piano sort of domain sounds fascinating to explore more deeply.
Sorry, I was just
comments coming through.
I was just putting the name of the book as well. If people are curious, that's the book. It really speaks to I know I didn't sort of lay out the book, but really traces the idea of spectralism and the piano, particularly going back to the late 19th, early 20th century, and how those ideas have changed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll walk us out here soon, and we'll sort of end the program momentarily. But if you don't mind, after we end it, just jump back on the Zoom, and you and I can just wrap up real quick after that. But I'll walk us out. We have reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. We do want to thank our guest here, Marilyn Nonken, for joining us today, as well as the folks that jumped on the Zoom call and are checking things out on the socials. It's been a pleasure. It's a holiday weekend, so we so much appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day to share it with us and celebrate the weekend with us. Don't forget to check out the podcast, pianotechradio.com. Check out the Substack blog. Just look for Piano Tech Masterclass on Substack. Social medias, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can go to the website and sign up for our email list, pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. Johann Krebs is saying, thank you for sharing with us your perspective or your perspective on music. Yes, Johann, thank you again for joining us today. Without further ado, I think we'll wrap up up for the day. Again, thank you so much, Marilyn, for joining us, and look forward to seeing